time for our Monday morning Bring It In True Hoop from Quarantine show, and we're very excited to welcome back Erica Vanstone, Executive Director of the Women's Flat Track Derby Association. And can you please explain the spider saying that we like to use so much?
Oh my goodness.
We'll start there.
Yeah, so we have a few roller derby clubs, leagues located in Australia. And I guess it was maybe 3 years ago, they brought forth a saying that was um, it means that you didn't come here to mess around. And it is, I am not here to tarry with spiders. And you can also replace tarry with a curse word. But yes, it generally means you mean business.
We are not here to tarry with spiders, everybody.
You're not.
That is not.
We can replace Terry and spiders if we want to. It really was a brilliant sentence. Yeah. We can control.
In the last few minutes, I was downstairs and I tried to sort of introduce the phrase as like a family thing in our house. And I think it's going to go well. I think we're going to. The Abbotts are refocused.
The Abbotts are feisty. Yeah, the Abbotts are feisty.
Well, how's it going, Erica? Last time we saw you, you were introducing a pioneering reopening plan for a Women's Flat Track Derby Association that resolved on low COVID counts. That can't be going very well. How's it going?
Yeah. I don't even remember when that was. Henry, do you remember how long ago
Probably
that was?
early April.
Sometime in the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Time is really meaningless to us anymore. And I think the plan that we designed was specifically designed to be a ladder that you could climb up and climb down if you needed to. And it was the design of it was really the emphasis was how to gradually return to a sport. But I think in looking across what was going on, just in the amount of information that we were getting in the first couple of months of the pandemic, we knew that cases would fluctuate. So we knew that there would be both an opportunity for teams to step on the ladder and that they would probably have to step back down again at some point too. We hoped they didn't, but that's really the point that we're at. We have about 75 or 80% of our total leagues. We have over 460 worldwide who have reported into the system thus far. And we had about 25% of our leagues back on the track. And this is globally. So a good number of those leagues and clubs are in Australia, are in New Zealand. We've had parts of Europe that have been able to get back on the ladder successfully. But now, over the last 2 weeks, we're seeing leagues start to step off the ladder. And we're not seeing that as a total failure. We're actually pretty glad that we designed something that people can step back off of. But in the US, it's just felt like failure for 8 months.
That's too bad. I mean, it's great that you have a system. How do you feel? So having put all the work into such a system, how do you feel when you look at, football, baseball, basketball, like how they're all doing? Like, do you feel like there's stuff you've learned that's relevant?
Yeah, I think actually the National Women's Soccer League hosted a tournament bubble that was successful. And those are the types of things that if we were to consider a model like that we would potentially look at. But on the other hand, we're a 501c3. The WFTDA runs a nonprofit sport. We're an amateur sport, and we don't have the same types of resources that the NBA, the NFL are able to have. And I think that it really showcased sort of the disparity in how professional sports, amateur sports, a lot of women's sports are able to compete at the same level for fans, for airtime, for information from our government this year. So I think it has been enlightening to me to see sort of that disparity kind of laid out in front of us over the past couple of months.
I can't shake the feeling that, like, without all the billions of TV revenue, you got better thinking, right? Like, right? You know what I mean?
You're saying money corrupts? Are you saying that, Henry? Really?
I mean, so like the NBA is potentially, they were talking on Friday, the board of governors, about like rushing a reopening. So when not in the bubble anymore, COVID cases at the all-time high, and we're going to rush a reopening with travel and everything. Why? Like, because there's an extra 500 mil if you start really fast, right? Like that's I'm not going to pretend that it's easy to operate without money, but like, how nice to not have to worry about
Yeah.
that little conundrum, right?
I mean, so I think the other thing it's worth pointing out is that even though we're not dealing or navigating with the same amounts of money that professional sports are, we are still a business and we need to stay in business. And I think we have tried really hard to manage our resources well, but it hasn't been easy. We've definitely taken a financial hit, just like every single sector of the sports industry. And so I think about the NBA's plan of wanting to get back to even just a broadcast type situation. And our colleague Jane McManus had been talking about last week, the week before, the Marist poll in terms of sports engagement and fans and viewership. And the NBA viewership is down. So the fact that they would, oh, nice job. Here it is.
There we go.
The fact that they're interested in kind of like considering bringing back a season, and I think it was at 37% of fans. I'm trying to figure out where the statistic is that I saw.
Yeah, MLB. So interest is down in individual sports across the board compared to Marist poll in 2017. The percentage of fans following America's most popular sport, the NFL, has gone from 67 to 52%. MLB and NBA have both fallen from 44 to 37%.
Right.
Yeah, and so I understand like the need and the interest to want to keep your business in business. I don't know if it's possible for the NBA to avoid it in their minds, going back as early as they would like to. And I don't know what that 500 mil is worth to them. I don't know what it represents. And yeah, we don't have the same level of concerns, but we certainly have the same concerns. And we're trying to figure out what our competitive season is going to look like for 2021.
Let me ask you this, Erica. It's a two-part question. The first part would be, from a global perspective, was there a pushback from your athletes on mask wearing? Those that aren't actually on the flat track, are they masked up around? And what was just that dialogue? And I mean, was it worse in some places than others? Did Australia, New Zealand have no problem with it? And then the second part of the question would be to what we were talking about, and we were talking about this a little bit off air, and Henry and I spoke this morning. Why aren't not just sports owners, but business leaders all across, let's just say this country, why aren't they screaming through the media channels that would love to have CEOs on their show, challenging people? If you want to get back to a regular life, just put a mask on and don't have big parties indoors without masks. Because then I know at your association, 5%, I think, was a magic number. If the infection rate, was that right? Below 5%, lots of other good things could happen, right? Yep. That's when the candy could be given out. And so that should be,
we could have Halloween if we're under 5%.
Right. Right. That should be. So why aren't businesses and owners doing that so that we can get back to that, considering our political leaders have failed so miserably? Do you have any thoughts on the first part I know you know about regarding just mask adherence and so forth?
Yeah, our community in roller derby is incredibly focused on health, safety, inclusion at every level. And we don't always get it right, but we try really hard. So I think we already knew coming forward that our community was going to be concerned about the health of others. And that is really it's pretty special to have a sports community that is very focused on that first and foremost. So we didn't ever have any pushback around masks. We certainly had questions and continued to field questions around our mathematical formula, right? Around our percentage and around the percent positive cases. We made those determinations around our baseline amount of COVID that we wanted to see or not see really early on in the conversation. Yep. And I think we were always open to the idea that that might be incorrect. So we continue to watch the data and try to figure out, whether or not that's a realistic metric, whether or not it's a safe metric. But in terms of wearing masks, I think people are very hyper aware of wanting to help control the spread of this virus, because we love playing roller derby. It's been a really stressful couple of months, and it would have been awesome at the end of the day to get on a track and hit other people, but I can't. So
That's fantastic.
that's really all our community wants to do.
Yeah. It's not just your community these days.
Yeah, I know, right?
A lot of us want
To your second point, I think one of the reasons that business owners aren't coming forward is because, like, somehow in America, mask wearing has become political. Science has become political. I know how it happened. I know that this administration really took it and ran with it as a theme for the reelection campaign of our president, which is extremely unfortunate that it is a political idea that putting a mask on is somehow equal to, suppressing your freedoms. So I really think that we never bought into that. Like, we in the roller derby community, we're always very on the same page about it. But I'm not so sure American business owners are, because I think they recognize that there are customers out there, consumers out there who don't want to be told what to do. And they're afraid to come forward potentially because, number one, their businesses are also probably recovering. They don't necessarily want to, they feel that potentially coming out in front of science, supporting science might mean that they lose a customer base in a year where they're already hemorrhaging sales.
Good point.
But I agree with you, because there are very important businesses that are out there that really could sort of take the reins. And I'm not even talking about sports. I'm
Right.
talking about, like, Amazon could come forward and be like, look, we're not going to deliver to your house unless you have a mask on or something, but they don't.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So this dovetails a little bit with what I initially reached out to you to talk about, which was the Seattle storm. It seemed, I was like, wow, I've never seen this before ever. Like, this is a team, a WNBA team's official Twitter account just had a big old vote Biden Harris. This is just last week, and it just struck me as I was surprised at how surprised I was. Right, I'm like, okay, this never happens. But you think about these things a lot. How do we think about sports and politics in the future? Right, it's been so different in the past, where it was all like, oh, Republicans buy sneakers too, or whatever the thing was. Like, we're not there anymore. We live in a different world now. Like, what's the right way to think about how to be political, how political to be, what to stand for, etc. In sports?
So I think that people who don't understand politics in sports think that sports like roller derby wake up one day and we're like, you know what we need more of in sports? Like, you're deciding whether or not to put hazelnut creamer in your coffee. I'm going to add a little bit of politics to my sports. That is not how it works. I think for organizations like the WFTDA, we are really fighting a battle just to exist in this world. We're a 501c3, first of all, so coming forward with an outright endorsement of a candidate is not something that we're legally allowed to do.
Right.
I suspect that the Seattle Storm and other entities that are coming forward are doing so knowing that, like, we have no other choice. We have been pushed to a point where we need to come out in front and say, the Trump administration is destroying my sport. The Trump administration's decisions have impacted roller derby, have impacted amateur sports, have impacted kids sports, youth sports, in ways that are going to be really hard to quantify right now, but won't be in the future. We'll be able to look back and say, hopefully have the data to be able to say, like, this was a really catastrophic thing that happened. But to design a system, I read this really awesome article in a local Philadelphia publication about nonprofit life called Generosity. And they wrote an article today about how we're not addressing the problems that 501c3s are designed to solve. Instead, we're just kind of offloading all of these problems to other entities and organizations to solve. And I think the WFTDA is very much in that mix. We are up against a number of different issues, including trans rights in sports. We're working with a few colleagues in rugby. World Rugby just put a ban on transgender women participation in women competitive pathways. So we are really interested in trying to maintain equity for women in a sports world, in a sports space that makes it really hard for us to exist. And so I think if we're thinking about that across a number of different political issues that have unfolded this year, I'm surprised there aren't more expressions of politics from athletes and influencers in the sports world, because I really think that everybody has a lot more power in these conversations than they might have used before.
Yeah, that feels right. It does feel like whatever the old rules of right versus left or Democrat versus Republican were in this space, it feels a little bit dated when it's like, no, I'm just trying to make sure the Constitution is around, like, or whatever, whatever basic protections or rights and freedoms that you value all feel a little bit under threat right now. It seems a little weird to handicap yourself in discussing those things, right?
And Erica, we haven't spoken to you, and maybe Judy, you can find this. Reuters had a picture today. The headline was NBA lost revenue down 1.5 billion, and the picture they put under the headline, this is Reuters, was a picture of the NBA players on the Black Lives Matter court. My wife actually sent it to me. She said that pretty interesting photo they chose to put under loss of 1.5 billion for Reuters. How is the whole the George Floyd phenomena that occurred afterwards? How did you feel that impact with your community?
I'm really actually pretty, yeah, thank you for telling me when I appeared on the show, because I couldn't remember myself. Yeah. So the murder of George Floyd, I think, have impacted our community pretty significantly. We as an organization had to work really hard on crafting an appropriate response, because like all other sports, I think we're back up and running and operational, but the WFTDA was really nose to the grindstone on trying to solve this COVID issue. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is a really important opportunity for us to be able to use to kind of right the wrongs that we've perpetrated as a sport since our development about 15 years ago. So I think we saw it as an opportunity to embrace change. And in the weeks that followed the murder of George Floyd this summer, we put together a panel of compensated humans from around the globe involved in roller derby.
Wow.
And they are all humans of color. We have members from Australia, we have members from Europe, we have members from America, we have members from South and Latin America. And our idea was that we, the majority of us who are managing the sport in the WFTDA, are white cisgender women. And we therefore are not going to do a great job designing a sport that is anything other than that. So we've brought these panelists in to help advise us on the best way forward for our sport, and have begun a process of dismantling racism within the WFTDA, have begun a process of sort of decolonization. And we have looked at other sports, for example, the NBA study on referees and athletes of color and penalties. And so I think those types of things have really inspired us to look a little bit more deeply at the way our officials are sort of recognizing and executing penalties and calling penalties on our players. But that's one of many, many ways that we can dig into this. And so this is going to take a long time, but at the same time, we're not playing right now. So if we're not working on trying to make a less racist, actually an anti-racist organization, if we're not working on that, then we're wasting time. So I think that that's how we see the world in the WFTDA is like, we have this downtime. We should be using it to fix as much of the sport as we can.
You're not playing and you're not telling with spiders either.
No.
Have you ever considered running for office of any sort beyond Plastic Association? We could use you, Erica. I know a country that could really use a woman like you. That's for sure.
It's called Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, you gotta start somewhere.
Wait. Can you talk a little trash about how things go in Philly at the polls? I know that you're. If you want to, we had a little bit of that off air, but I found it entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's true. Oh my goodness. First of all, delightfully stalkerish that you publish my tweets. Yeah. So what's really amazing is that we've had, I think, over 250,000 ballots returned already, which is amazing. But Philly is a deep Democratic stronghold. And I think a core of that for the city has always been our unions. And so a lot of the committee workers for the Democratic Party who will sit out on the corners in front of the polling stations are union workers, and they are allowed to take the time to work the polls because it's important to unions. I think that they are very families first, but they also don't mess around. So I think a polling station in a Democratic city like Philadelphia is a pretty safe place for Democrats to be on election day.
That says a lot. Okay, so can we look at a couple other of your one of your
if this show is going to be about looking at my tweets, that's okay.
Well, actually, we could look at one of Jean's tweets. I was particularly interested in this, especially female. Do you know what I'm talking about? Our president said that here we go. Oh God.
A socialist nation. We're not going to have a socialist president, especially any female socialist president. We're not going to have it. We're not going to put up with it. It's not going to happen. Look, we're not going to be a socialist nation. We're not going to have
We're not going to put up with it. We're not going to put up with having a woman. Oh, how could we possibly stomach that? It's pretty interesting to me to see that was like a real honest moment for him, right? Like he said the thing that he probably thinks every day of his life. So yes, that was the real Trump.
I mean, I think when he was first elected, I was, I didn't know what was a show and what was, pandering, right? And what was really him, right? And then later we learned about his dad was, I think arrested at a KKK rally, and there are more clues from like the Mary Trump book about like, oh, the racism is not an act, right? And I feel like we're seeing it play out a little bit now in the campaign where he's like, oh, if I just tell people that like essentially in code, Black people are going to ruin your suburbs, like then they're all going to love me. Like he thinks that, like he actually thinks that. Whereas
he always has.
It's not working. It's not working, right? This is the I listened to the Daily this morning, and it's about red wine and blue, which is like basically suburban women in Ohio are organizing themselves, and they're like, a lot of them did vote for Trump, but they're just like, he has lost us now, right? Like this is the way he's losing them, right? Which is pivotal to the poll numbers we see now.
I know that it feels like forever ago, but I think that people forget that he is almost single-handedly responsible for forming the Women's March. Like it exists because of things he said. And I think that is a constant in my mind. And I know many women have not forgotten that, continue to march about that, continue to talk about that. So I think that I think he probably lost a lot more women after a lot of those tapes came out after the 2016 election than he thinks, right? Like, I think that it wasn't like a long, slow burn. Like, we've been sitting here simmering for 4 years going, okay, we're getting ready. All right, it's one more year. Okay, it's 6 more months. Okay, it's a pandemic. People are dying. 3 more weeks. So I don't think that this is a new thing. I think that this is, I do think the Women's March will continue even if Trump loses, because we have so much at stake with Amy Coney Barrett coming into the Supreme Court. And I think is that what, that's her name? Yeah, exactly.
Nailed it.
She is, potentially threatens a lot of rights. And I don't necessarily, I don't personally think that there's a reason to let up on any of these conversations. And I think a Biden Harris administration would mean potentially that we are more, hopefully more likely to bring these conversations to the surface in a way that has meaning in terms of policy coming out of it, than potentially the Trump administration.
Somewhat related, maybe the WNBA had its ratings go up year over year in the finals. Do you have any theories as to what was going on there?
Well, the WNBA rules, so that's probably it.
Noted.
I think that, like, I also, women definitely, as I said before, like, just to exist in a sports space have a lot to work on. And I think I was not surprised at all when they had immediate responses to the murder of George Floyd, to a lot of the continued atrocities that rolled out and continue to unfold. So it is not surprising to me to see them out front, because those are situations where, we and as women are kind of up against it every day, and we don't necessarily have as much to lose some of the times, because we don't, the WNBA potentially didn't have the following, but because they are able to use their platform for good, are attracting humans who are also interested in the same things. And there are a lot of people out there who are, and I think that that's the story that maybe never gets told, is like, well, what about all the people who are really interested in equity? What about the people who are really interested in seeing women succeed in sports? They're out there. Really, they are.
Not to change the subject much, but I'm thinking about the WNBA and the success they had, and hopefully will continue to have. What are you guys doing in preparation for the day, whenever it will be, where infection rates are at 2% across the board, more or less, and in many cases, like New Zealand, non-existent? Is there thought of, there's a lot of people that have been cooped up for a long time, and they're going to get out and do things that they've never done before? Is there thought about getting ready to embrace a whole new surge of fans that want to play?
Yeah, and in fact, roller skating in general, the demand for roller skating products this summer skyrocketed.
Right, yeah.
So we know that there are people out there who have roller skates. Another group of humans we've been working with is Community and Bowls, and they are essentially park skating with roller skates. And so if you go, most towns or major metropolis areas, like, you will have a skate park or two, and there will be skateboarders there. Imagine putting on roller skates and going in and trying out these elements. Those are things that we're working on actively cross promoting. So I think any roller skating helps us eventually. What we're really talking about in terms of planning for a return is to de-emphasize the victory, like to de-emphasize the rankings and competitive pathway, and to emphasize community and community rebuilding, because that's what's going to have to happen, right? We have all of these humans. We had this awesome competitive pathway. Our 2019 championships was one of the funnest we've had, and it is a very competitive sport, and our teams that play at a top level work really hard, and they deserve to have the opportunity to showcase what they do. We also recognize that those ranked pathways probably won't be able to be rebuilt until 2022. And since we have the time, let's rebuild them better. So I think that's another thing that we're looking at too. We have over 460 teams that fall into this same ranking system. So we're talking about sitting down with competitive play to kind of pull out divisions differently, potentially investigate regional play. So I think we want to offer more opportunities, which means to emphasize community. And it means to de-emphasize the Super Bowl, right? And really emphasize the kids, the humans, the amateurs who are playing at the ground level. Like if we're the NFL, we're not focusing on the Super Bowl. We're focusing on the Pop Warner. We're focusing on all of the humans who help us become who we are. And I know that that's potentially a radical shift from a lot of sports too.
There's so at the very beginning you said that you knew that the community would be looking out for each other, and so you never had issues with masks and the like. You also said you miss hitting people.
Oh.
Can you just kind of marry those for me a little bit? Like, what's the right amount of violence among friends? Like,
yeah, and so the thing that's funny too, though, is that we knew that we wouldn't be able to play roller derby with a mask. Like there's not really any level of it is so physically it's such physical exertion. You're sweating, you're breathing, like droplets flying everywhere. You know, you're wiping droplets all over everybody else's face. And so it's not a sport that you could just wear a mask and maybe help to protect your other competitors. So we knew that in order to play roller derby the way roller derby is meant to be played, we essentially had to have a COVID-free environment, or we had to have as much of a COVID-free environment as possible. And it's really hard to not have that in our lives because we really love playing. We love all of the things that contact sports allow you to do with your bodies. Those are things that women identifying athletes had not necessarily ever been exposed to growing up. And I think those opportunities were just so powerful for people that it's kind of hard to replace it. Like I tried running and it wasn't that awesome. So I do trail skating, and now I'm doing park skating, and it's great because it gets your cardio up, but it really just, it doesn't beat hitting your friends.
Right. You can't,
It really
you
doesn't.
can't, you can't skate in the park and then just plow down some, elderly man walking on the side of the road with his dog. We have laws against that.
Unfortunately, yeah, we do.
Right. You may want to do that.
What if you got a couple of union friends who, tough people to be on the trail for you, in tough times.
I like how you use the word community, though. I think there's something that's missing, going back to my comments just regarding business leaders and industry leaders in general, not to mention politicians who we're just so used to being disappointed in them. That's a separate issue. But peer pressure can work this way. And I learned this actually from my son who plays college basketball. And he was telling me on the phone, I think it was even last night, that one of the better players on his team who intends to make the NBA or high level Europe needs a good year this year. And he is afraid that the season can get canceled. If any one, top 20, top 10 team has a bunch of guys sick or whatever. And I'm sure this is happening at a lot of places where the athletes who have so much invested are saying to those that they feel aren't as focused because they're not as mature or whatever, hey, if you go out and get exposed, you're exposing me. And that's putting my career at risk. Well, that's community peer pressure. Mm-hmm. That's the same reason why you see a friend of yours grabbing a beer and you take his keys. Mm-hmm. I got you. I'm drinking soda tonight. You're good. If you want to have a couple of beers, go. This is what community can do, right? And we're not seeing any of things being fostered anywhere. And just to bring it back to where we were before, when you're talking about skating, the WNBA having so much success, I think is an amazing opportunity for women, especially to challenge the moms and dads out there who have a daughter and for whatever reason just have not pushed them into sports. I pushed mine into competitive dance as opposed to regular dance because I wanted to feel what a team does. I think it teaches you a lot as an individual. It's instructive that way. And I understand why they've not let their kids go out and play pickup basketball or school basketball, because you're exposing yourself to risk. But at some point, hopefully, we're not going to have that risk anymore. And so that family that's never really had a daughter want to do anything athletic, now's the time, whether it's basketball, whatever. Hey, go. I mean, the guys too. It's not just girls, of course. Go try the sport, because they've been cooped up for a long time. There's an opportunity there to get a lot more kids involved athletically, which is good for their bodies.
Come to roller derby.
Oh.
Yeah, I think even like a lot of sports that are available to young women in schools, in athletic programs, are still men's sports redesigned for
Right.
women.
Right.
And I think that roller derby offers a unique perspective because it was designed for women identifying non-binary humans in mind. And that's already a huge shift to how sports have been designed in the past. So I think when people find us, when people find roller derby, it is because all of those other things don't speak to them. And it's interesting because we're actually in some of the partnering that we've done with bowl skating and park skating, it's a similar conversation. You walk into a skateboard park as a woman identifying human, and there are not a lot of others who look like me there. I'm the only one on roller skates, and there's definitely a design perspective that is not speaking directly to me. So I think having a space,
What meaning what?
Meaning that it is definitely a place and a vibe that is not designed with women or women identifying humans in mind. It is it's a space that we have to do some navigating in and figuring out, and to figure out, sort of like and even like the unwritten code of skate parks, right? Like, how do you go in, and how do you determine when to take your line? And so I think it's actually a lot of this park skating has kind of helped me understand the spot that roller derby is in the world too, coming into a completely different universe of how sports operate, and trying to speak the same language is often very exhausting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I completely forgot what I was going to say, but let me take one pause for a second if I could. I'm wearing this sweatshirt. I forgot to mention the top. This is Adina, usually here on Mondays. She's on the road, not available, but I have been seeking a fancy hoodie for a long time. It's been on my Christmas list and stuff for years, and I've never nailed it. But I got this mostly to support Adina and Chad with their startup. But I'm telling you, this is the greatest sweatshirt ever. Like, it came on Saturday. I've not been seen in any other thing since it came. I did take it off to take a shower and work out, but now right back on. Yeah, another Lane sweatshirt. Super thumbs up.
Mine's on its way, but I may not be donning it till sometime in January.
Yeah, you're gonna need a winter. Florida's gonna rob you of this opportunity.
It's gonna be a wait. It looks comfortable.
Erica, can I invite you into? So we had this conversation here this weekend. I guess a little bit inspired by years ago. My wife and I went to some pre-wedding event. We did paintball. I think it's the only time I've ever been paintballing in my life.
Sure.
And it was fun. It was actually outside Philly.
I was going to say, was it in the Poconos? Because that sounds like a Poconos activity.
And so we did different teams. And at one point, so I got hit first, and you exit the combat area after you've been hit, right? And then out they come. Maybe we're 7-on-7, I think. And pretty much I'm like, oh my gosh, look at who's out here. Like, it's 6 of us from my team and no one from the other team, which means we have just Amy. Our friend Amy is in there. God knows what's going to happen to Amy, right? Anyway, so then eventually the ref guy comes out, trailed by everyone who was in there. And I guess we all assumed that Amy lost, Trevor, but then I was like, I guess we shouldn't assume, right? So from a distance, I'm just like, who won, right? And then Amy just lifts her fucking rifle over her head, and is like, like the most nom scene ever. I'm like, that's my fucking God, like, Amy, what did you do to them? And but it just struck me that this is an example of, and there are many now in sports, of just kind of a messy, scrappy, aggressive kind of thing you get from that, which some people really value and like, which is like, wasn't available. It's not in ballet, right? It's not in a lot of the things, you don't know what I'm getting at here, but like that, pickup basketball can feel like that. Sometimes you're bloody and whatever, and you're just like, yeah, we're going for it. This is what we're doing. That's important, right? That's what you're getting at a little bit, right?
Yeah, it is important. And I think we're often told, women are often told sort of like every day what they can and cannot do with their bodies. And I think that even permeates us, that even permeates our life view sort of growing up about what is appropriate and not appropriate for cis women to do, for trans women to do, for non-binary humans to do. And we sort of like have to figure out how to cast off some of that like crud that kind of seeps into our brains. And playing roller derby is an opportunity for you to do something with your body that nobody's ever told you you could do before.
Yeah.
Right? First of all, putting on roller skates like sounds super fun. And then hitting people while you're on roller skates, or more often than not, our formations are a lot closer to rugby or, football formations where we're not
Power
necessarily, it's not necessarily all about hitting. It's about blocking. It's about cutting out openings. It's about making sure that you're taking down or taking out your opposing jammers. So there's a lot of contact sport type philosophy that comes from football or from rugby that we've borrowed and put into this sport that really forces you to use your brain differently, forces you to use your body differently, and is just so polar opposite to what society is telling you to do, or you should do, or you should be capable of doing. And I think learning that not only can you do it, but it's really fun to do it is this very exciting experience for people. And it's not just women or women identifying humans. There are a lot of juniors, there are a lot of cisgender men who are involved in the community, and finding that sort of our brand of contact sport is pretty heckin' fun.
There's another facet too. Speaking as a coach and also as a dad, I mean, Henry's right. Ballet is different than paintball or flat track derby. Not that it's not very tough and all of that. My daughter,
unbelievable. Tough.
I know you know that, right? My daughter, as Henry knows, was a serious dancer for a long time. She's in college now, but she only did it initially for fun and learning, and then she did it for. I asked her to join a team. So for years, she was on a competitive team, super competitive, but had never even asked to do solo. The first time she asked to do solo, I said, great. She entered. I thought she was amazing, but, come on, there's 8. I mean, if you ever go to these dance adventures, it just goes forever. And they didn't even announce her category until like midnight. Like my wife went home. We had a 5-year-old son, her twin, at home. I stayed. And as they're counting down the top 4, I really thought she was going to finish second or third, but I'm totally biased and know nothing. And she won. And it was a very emotional thing to be there. I was the only dad left, and hundreds of people there still. And so we're driving home, and this is the point I'm going to make. She said, Dad, I said, how does it feel? Because she was mobbed by her teammates, whatever. And she said, Dad, I threw up after I competed. Like, it didn't feel great at all. I said, honey, that's because you competed in a way your body had never known it could before. I've watched you perform before. You never you took risk. You just gave it all you had, and you didn't know what would happen. I'm sure you never even thought you'd win. That's what happens the first time you do it. It'll get easier because your body knows it can be pushed to those limits more. That's what sports can do for all of us.
I agree. And I think that it is one of the secret pleasures of sports competition to push your body until you puke. And like figuring out what that feels like. I think every roller derby skater has been there. And in particular, like if you're jamming and you are not lead and you have like a straight 2 minutes that you have to try to get through a wall that's impossible. And then at the end, you just got to go over and throw up in a bucket and then wait another 90 seconds until you have to go back on the track. And it's not a feeling that I think our society has really prepared women for. But once you get there, you're like, now I get it.
Right.
Now I understand why sports are so awesome.
There's so much, like in every sport, I think I'm right in saying this probably is part of it, and dance, everything. There's a moment where like you get an injury of some kind that in the moment, not a big one, where you're just like, of course I'm not stopping for this bloody elbow or whatever the thing may be. And then you're in the shower 90 minutes later and it really hurts. And you're like, well, what was going on before? It's like, well, what was going on was you were having fun.
Yeah, and your
So much fun
adrenaline.
that you
Your
couldn't even
adrenaline is
register
just
it, right?
like,
Like,
mhm.
I think it's cool to rehearse that. Like, sometimes I'm doing something that's so all encompassing to me that like this thing, which is a big deal at 9 p.m. at 7 p.m. was like nothing, would never even think to slow down for it, which is like, not everybody gets that. Not everyone gets that little routine.
Which is so sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Henry just wrote an amazing piece for us last week where, and this is something Henry does more commonly, probably than most NBA writers, is
Keep talking, David. Go on.
he uses, I told him on the phone, I'm jealous of his writing talent. I am. Not his hair, but his writing talent for sure.
Yeah, the hair's
he interviewed.
Oh
David
no.
muted.
He
David, you're
was
muted.
complimenting you, Henry, and his audio dropped.
Probably the FBI. They're probably hacking him.
I pressed mute by mistake.
There we go. Okay.
Microphone. he introduced the idea the NBA is going to be rushing back to the schedule with 72 games and fewer days than normal, whatever. But he used a mountain biking competition. Is that what you call mountain biking, Henry?
Yeah.
And it was a brilliant description of how the world championship in Europe was decided by a woman on a course that was so wrecked from rain and so challenging to begin with that everyone was crashing and actually getting hurt. The woman almost could have walked her bike through and won. And that's what we have. And his point is that's what the NBA is going to be. If we want to really protect our best athletes, the best way to do it is not to let them play, to keep them protected more. And so on a sport like yours, that really is a violent sport like football to some degree and hockey, what are the precautions you guys take? And do they change as people get older? Right? What are you guys doing to protect your athletes while violence is a part of it still?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. So before the pandemic, we actually were partnering with a company that creates impact sensors to do an impact study, and we got about 2 weeks worth of data before we had to shut everything down. But one of the unique challenges the WFTDA is in, aside from roller derby being a very violent contact sport, there's almost no data on women in contact sports in scientific research
for any sport, not just
but particularly for contact sports. All of the concussion information we've had to take from other sports, from other organizations, and we wanted to know on our own sort of what the picture was, what the impacts were like on bodies that were participating in our sport, so that we could figure out if there were ways for us to be able to redesign rules, redesign baseline education for new skaters. And we also, at the same time, put out a survey to our community and said, we want to know about your injuries. We sell a catastrophic skater insurance policy to our athletes to make sure that they're covered if and when they are injured. And so we sent the survey out to everybody and said, tell us about your injuries. Tell us, how they're occurring, under what circumstances, what parts of your body are getting injured. And some of the things that we learned were that the athletes at our highest levels of competition were more likely to become injured. And we had a high suspicion that a lot of the injuries were concussion related. But what we didn't necessarily know is what other injuries were also prevalent. So we're looking into the concussions. When we do restart, we're going to restart the study about the impacts and forces on our bodies. And then also we're going to take a look at, are there ways that if we find that, for example, in newer skaters, if their prevalent injury is ankle breaks, for example, ankle fractures.
Yeah.
Is it because they are consistently trying to execute the same types of stops? If they are, maybe we can create some education and programming around how to teach those stops differently, or how to encourage different stops. Because I think if you're a hockey fan, you know that hockey stops are kind of like a really important stop for skaters on ice. We've adopted a version of that for roller skates, where we're doing hockey stops, but depending on your wheels, your skating surface, the humidity in the room,
Right.
if your wheel catches a hockey stop in the wrong way, that's really bad news for your ankles. So we collected information from our community to find out what types of injuries we need to look into. We knew concussion was number one. So when the pandemic is over, we're going to go back to figuring out what we can do differently with trying to train to prevent against concussion.
Well, there's a thing that I love here, which is like, if you, the governing body, look out for safety, then the skaters can go buck wild, which is the goal, right? Like they can go really hard, which is fun. This is like the sad thing about the women's world championship downhill mountain biking, was the organizers weren't good at keeping them safe. So then this woman named Camille Balanche won by riding like your grandma. Like she rode like she rode I mean, she's a wonderful athlete who has been
20%, 20%. She gave 20% of what she had to give, or less, to win.
She made her goal to keep herself safe, and everyone else wrecked, and so she won. Which was like, too bad they didn't set it on a dry course in a place that was suitable for mountain bike racing. Here we go. Yeah, here she is. This was like, you know, you don't. That's like balance bike stuff, right?
He basically is like Fred Flintstone.
Anyway, so,
down the road.
Yes.
That's
so. But I feel like, you know, if you take care of, you know, what are the general parameters of reducing injuries and institute the rules and have the right facilities and equipment, then they can freaking wail into each other fairly safely, right? And that'd be nice for them.
Yeah, I coach juniors, and the junior rule set is actually divided into kind of two major strands that are played. Level 3, which is the same contact level that adults play, and level 2, which is not accelerating into hits. And the kids that I coach in Philly, none of them want to play level 2, because all of them want to hit as hard as they possibly can. And so I think it is, you're absolutely right. It's kind of part of the sport that we want to play it at the highest level we possibly can.
But this goes to Jane McManus's thing about a sports reflection of society, right? If you build it the right way, you'll get the best sports. And it's where our governing bodies in America have failed so badly with the pandemic. They didn't watch out for everyone. We all have to watch out for ourselves now. And it's hard to do that with 330 million people, because if everyone was doing things like my wife and I are doing, and probably you guys are doing, we'd have fans back in gyms and stadiums and everything. But because we have no organizing body from the top doing it, it's fair to say that your association is just much better, more organized and science-based than our government here in America. We can ask what Gerard.
Yes, that's fair.
That seems right. We can ask Gerard what he thinks about it.
Gerard, are you there? Knock. I don't know if you remember Erica. Gerard.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he's like the star of Fridays, but on Mondays and Wednesdays, he's always comes on at the end and asks better questions than David and I have also.
Hello. How are you, Erica?
Good. I stalk you on Twitter the way Henry stalks me on Twitter.
That's good, right?
Oh, it's a scene, man. It's a scene.
You're far funnier than I am.
No.
I do have a question for you, Erica. I know you're busy with roller derby and all the fantastic things you do, but you are a Philly.
Oh, yes.
What's going on with your 76ers? We are a basketball show after all.
Cheers, my man.
I don't have a response for you. I just have a long exhale.
You got Doc.
Yeah, it's a mess. And I'll be honest and say that I'm a fan of the organization. I think the Sixers have a lot of great priorities, and I like what they do in the community. And I really appreciate sort of the approach to skill building that they've taken across the organization. They've been a little bit hard for me to watch the last couple of seasons, but
not just you.
Yeah.
Did you see the picture though with someone just wrote this, every time Doc Rivers, there was, I think, a photographer snapping pictures of Doc's like first day. Whenever he was done with different meetings, he'd go back into his office, and I think it was a woman photographer. I could be wrong, but the person was witnessing what Doc was doing and listening and hearing nothing. And so he wasn't typing, was what he was writing letters. Old school. I thought that was really, if you're wondering where his charm comes from, it isn't such a bad thing to read a handwritten letter, as we all know. Written from your new head coach, I would be very surprised if he wasn't writing, and maybe not just to his players. It's fair he was writing to staff, whatever. But that's something that could, I mean, he's good at building charisma to some degree. I mean, what happened this year with the Clippers, I don't really blame Doc. I mean, a pandemic is a pandemic, and these are grown men. He's done a good job before of bringing people together that are not so easy to, like the Celtics guys, it was not easy to get them to play as one, for sure. And Doc found a way to do it, at least for a couple of years. I think he'll be better than Brett was, but there are some fundamental flaws in the roster that I don't know if they'll solve it or not.
So Erica, check your mailbox. You might have a letter from Doc Rivers, and then that would call.
It's true. Like my actual mailbox.
Yeah. That'd be nice.
Personal invitation.
Hopefully that letter, whatever the letters he was writing, Joel and Ben's letters are the longest, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben, please explore the 3-point line. We get a third point, young man. Even in Australia, you get a third point.
Ouch.
Erica, does it bother you that Josh Harris visited the White House and Jared Kushner?
Oh, don't tell her that.
Has all of his money from Apollo Global, whose founder was close to Jeffrey Epstein. Does this bother you at all?
I don't know that I'm surprised.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know that
You
I'm
just have a lot of
surprised.
Epstein ties in flat track derby.
Yeah, not as much. Not as much. Actually, the funny politics and sports, like the one that always used to, well, the one that's pissed me off the most has been Dana White. And not that I'm surprised at all that he's stumping for Trump, but it just gets me so enraged because I feel like, man, contact sports can do so much better than this. Don't represent contact sports. You're just talking about yours, not all contact sports.
Yeah. I live in a very narrow sports world. Dana White is the UFC guy.
Yeah,
right?
UFC.
Right. Henry, you know what you're talking about.
You did it, Henry.
Henry, you beat me to it. I was thinking the same thing, but I wasn't sure if it was a man or a woman, but I thought it was UFC.
And are they the ones that got the island?
Yeah, Fight Island.
Oh, really? That's actually cool. I didn't know they called it Fight Island. No, the name is cool. I'm not
Let's
saying
all go. Let's all go live there.
Let's go. Well,
Maybe
Erica,
there's no COVID on Fight Island.
You would love Fight Island, Erica, because you're like, all right, that's it.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm
Yeah.
from Philly. I play roller derby. Let's
Yeah.
fight.
Maybe Philly is Fight Island. Maybe that's what Philly is.
Right.
Like,
Is there fighting
Spelled
involved?
with a PH.
There's not
Yeah.
real fighting
Yeah.
though when you're
Fight
people
Island.
it's not like hockey, Erica.
Oh no,
oh.
no, we don't. Well, so no, early roller derby definitely did.
Yes.
But the WFTDA rule set has phased that out because we care about people's brains
Right.
and their bodies and their bones.
The worst part
how
of
do you phase that out? That seems like what actually happens during the phase out? No.
referees are empowered to not allow fighting.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
I wish hockey would do that. When they start fighting, I just turn it off. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. The fighting part. I'm glad it's not in our sport anymore. When people talk about basketball in the heyday, which I was watching growing up and playing, that doesn't excite me to see the way they just imagine how much better Jordan had been had he not got forearms to the jaw every time he drove. He still did it. It didn't keep him from doing it. These guys are grown men trying to, make money and be stars. It would have been just way better basketball not to pound them in the head every time they drove.
Right. Save your fighting for outside the polls.
Those are the words to walk on right there.
Thank you, Erica.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was fun.